Moj gost u emisiji je Paddy Cosgrave. Čovek koga mnogi nazivaju vizionarom, neki ga nazivaju i blagim anarhistom, a neki ga nazivaju i provokatorom. U svakom slučaju, Paddy Cosgrave je čovek koji je stvorio Web Summit, najveću tehnološku konferenciju na svetu. Od Dublina preko Lisabona, Rija, Dohe. Okuplja stotine hiljada start-upova, najvećih kompanija iz oblasti tehnologije i sada želimo da vidimo zašto je došao u Srbiju. Pođimo. So, Paddy, first of all, thank you very much for coming to Belgrade, for visiting Belgrade. I remember when we met first time. I remember when I met you first time, and not, we didn't met. I just saw you, and it was 1 year ago. It was not the last, but the one before Web Summit. When I came with the delegation of Serbia, and there was about 400 people from Serbia, not on the organized pavilion, but to see what is new, because they all told me it is the most important tech conference of the world. And as a president of the chamber, I said, okay, I need to go there. And I saw that. And then last year, 2024, we organized our companies, our startups, and prepared very well to be there. And then we met. And I told you there is one interesting place in Europe I wanted you to visit. And thank you very much that so quickly you came to us to see what is happening. What was your drive to come? It was like, who are these guys that came to Lisbon in such numbers? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is watching over a short period of time. So 2016, 2017, when we moved to Portugal first, there were, maybe this many Serbians were coming to Web Summit. Over a very short period of time, the number of Serbians at the event, not just part of the official delegation, but just in general, has grown massively. And I think it's an indication of, well, there's already something clearly happening in Serbia. And for me, it's, you just got to come and see what's in the air. What are people drinking? Why is Serbia producing so much engineering talent? Obviously been producing sports talent for quite some time, but now it's producing startups as well. So it's good to be here.
So we will come also to the topic of your second passion, or maybe a first passion, I don't know, but or parallel passion, which is tennis. But maybe it is something about being or growing in the disruptive times. For the first time I think in the history, if you actually went through, historically as a country, as a society, to a disruption, and we went through the disruption, it is for the first time actually a good thing, because now we are living in the disruption. Do you think so?
Yeah, some disruptions can be, deeply, damaging to a society. And Ireland's had its moments over the last 30 or 40 years, and yeah, you breed, of course, a certain type of resilience. I think when a society has been rich for generations, sometimes there isn't the appetite or the drive to try and achieve things. People are content. And so I look at Portugal, I look at Serbia, I look at Ireland. These were peripheral countries. These were poor countries. They had, different events. Portugal came through a dictatorship in the 70s. Ireland had its own issues. And there's a certain spirit, I think, that is created. And sometimes that can manifest in entrepreneurship and other outlets. So I'd agree.
Let's get maybe back to some easier topic. Every year there is more than 70,000 people coming to the Web Summit. Being from Ireland, which we consider as Serbians very close in the mentality to us, what is easier, to organize 70,000 people being 3 days in Lisbon on your conference, or organizing 3-day wedding in Ireland?
3-day wedding, yeah, no, 3-day wedding in Ireland is a little bit harder, I think. Nobody at Web Summit tends to punch anybody else at Web Summit, but that could always happen at a big family wedding over 3 days. But yeah, I mean, bringing 70,000 people together for a business conference is, I mean, look, it involves a lot of people, 5,000 people, but everybody's very well behaved. They're there to network. It's not like a music concert where things get messy. It's a pleasure. It's an amazing thing to do.
Yeah, it's even. I always, when I talk about Web Summit and so on, the word conference is not enough for me, which is really, I think it is a platform more.
Yeah.
It's really became a platform for the new things, for the entrepreneurship, for the young people, for the not only young people young in mind, having a new breakthrough ideas, and having this place where they can share and there they can pitch and there they can exchange their ideas. I think this is a very, very, very interesting. And not only that, Web Summit was always a place, and you made it so, where the ideas could be speaking freely, where you can really exchange the positions, which are not always the same, of course. The opinions which are different, the positions, political positions, but also technological positions which are different, and it was always like, it is controversial. But I think, do you think that there's a lack of spaces like this in the world?
Yeah, but I mean, it's not easy. I look across the river and I can see Huawei's offices. And I remember in 2019, we were told by certain large governments, namely the United States, from the White House, that you can't have Huawei at Web Summit in Portugal. And I thought it was ridiculous. And we went ahead, and then we announced Edward Snowden as well as another speaker. And I think America were very pissed off. But, I think to create a more interesting space, you sometimes have to create difficult conversations that are going to antagonize and isolate certain people. But at the end of the day, Web Summit is a gathering of startups, and those startups are disruptive forces. They are antagonistic to the establishment. And if Web Summit wasn't prepared to sometimes push things a little bit, to push to difficult conversations, then I think it would be just a bit of it would be dead. It would die quite quickly. You have to have a little bit of kind of antagonism at the heart of Web Summit.
And I think if you see your career path and everything, what happened to you at the development and the Web Summit in the last 15 years, maybe somebody was a controversy or not controversy, or difficult times and the successful times. I always imagine this quote of famous director Stanley Kubrick, which is that when he got a Life Award for his work, he said this: he's not really sure what is the real meaning of the Icarus story. Yeah. Is it don't fly too high, or is it actually forget about wax and feathers and do something better with the wings? And if I see your career path, it was always, reinventing the wings.
A conference is a show. And if you take tennis as an example, and you take, Nick Kyrgios, he's not he realizes, I think, to a degree, that tennis, like any live event, is a show. And a lot of people will watch him play tennis, sometimes more recently doubles with Novak Djokovic, simply because there is controversy surrounding it. So over the last 15 years, of course, we have leaned into controversy. I mean, sports events where there's controversy, there's two boxers, they don't like each other, or the managers are saying things. People are drawn to the controversy, and then they kind of go, oh, maybe I'll go to this thing. We sometimes lean into to the controversy a little bit. It sells tickets.
And it is, I think it's also important for the opening of the spaces for dialogue.
Yeah.
Because somewhere I read your quote, which I will paraphrase. I am not exactly the same, but where you said, you're really surprised of how many well-educated, wealthy people are living in the society being quiet of the problems of this society they're members in.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, that's just a belief that I have. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are, you know, they're pushing against the existing status quo, and they're very often willing to articulate what their actual true views are. And oftentimes, you know, for whatever reason, people that are comfortable are reluctant to rock the boat a little bit because they worry about the consequences to them as opposed to the consequences to people less privileged. And I think that when you're in a privileged position, you have a responsibility to people less fortunate to highlight, you know, why they, you know, their life may be going the wrong direction, even if it comes with certain costs to your life. That's just my belief, and I'm not someone who immediately, you know, whatever the status quo is or whatever, you know, the discourse is, I don't necessarily believe it. I like to go, I think most people are like that. They like to go and just scrutinize, check the kind of facts and go, okay, is this really what's happening? And maybe that's because I'm Irish and I live beside, you know, the biggest empire in the world. And, you know, they spent 800 years, you know, doing stuff to Ireland. And I'm like, okay, this is what Great Britain say, why they're doing it. Or this is what America say, why they're doing it. I'm not always a believer that, you know.
But this is exactly what the Web Summit is giving to the people and to the people to not only the space for, you know, to know each other, or to space to sell or to catch investors, but also to refine, also to challenge themselves.
And it's not my views that matter really at all. It's the views of experts on stage. You know, it's that somebody's there articulating China's position in the world. There's somebody, you know, the CTO of the White House saying, no, you shouldn't believe what China is saying. You should believe what I am saying. And then it's up to people that are there. We try and provide as broad a spectrum of as possible of views on the future. And it's up to people attending to decide for themselves whether this version of artificial intelligence or that version of artificial intelligence or this other version of artificial intelligence is going to be the future. You know, the future's uncertain. People have strong beliefs in lots of different directions, and it's up to all of us to, you know, figure as best we can the right way.
This is why I like to have you in Belgrade, because this city is really something which is, we can call it in between. Or, you know, the country which is, you know, very close, connected to the EU, but not as a member state, having, you know, the economy as a part of the industry, as a part of the European architecture of economical architecture, but still with a very, very strong relation with Asia, very strong relation with African countries. And basically that's why I'm happy to have somebody to talk with who is sharing also this vision of we need to open up.
Oh yeah, I think so. Like, you know, maybe the wrong word to use is you're seeing a balkanization of the world, where one group of large countries are saying you can't work with this group over here, namely large countries in the West and China. And this sort of splitting of the world into separate kingdoms, I think is a bad thing. So when you have countries that can act as gateways between these countries, or go-betweens between these different power blocks, these different empires, I think those smaller kind of countries or regions, you can take Qatar as an example, I think they have a lot to benefit from in a world where, at the moment at least, it's becoming more fractured and distant.
Coming to this topic of, let's say, geopolitical or geoeconomical momentum of the time, I think we are living through two different major challenges. One is geopolitics, which actually we know more or less. We went through different periods, our past generations also, and now it is the first question. And you also mentioned it. You know, China is, you know, coming. Not only coming, China is there. And many other states also. Gulf, and how do you see Europe in all this context? And I mean Europe as a idea, in Europe as a possible future player, in the global market? Because do you think we need a wake-up call?
Yeah, I'm no expert, and I don't know if the choice is between Europe aligning with, the United States or Europe aligning with China. I think I would like to hope that Europe has options, that it can be A or B, or it can be European way. So option C. I don't know. I'd like more thought or exploration of option C. What does a Europe that is slightly more independent of, the desires or the wishes or the preferences or priorities of other large countries?
But for that, we need a space to talk about it in
Yeah.
Europe between us.
Yeah, we're very divided though. There are lots of little countries as opposed, does Europe really exist, or is it just, a kind of a large squabbling family? And I think if you're other large power blocks in the world, having a very divided Europe is a preferential future. And it doesn't feel like Europe's becoming any more united in recent times. But
And coming to the second major challenge, which is the technological evolution, revolution, call it whatever you like. But this is something that we don't know. And it's something which really new. For the first time, I think, since the Industrial Revolution, we have the thing which is actually democratization of, let's say, technology.
Sure.
For the first time, you don't need to be computer scientists in order to use the technology in the way to make something new.
yeah, yeah.
Where are we going?
That's the trillion-dollar question, to which, I certainly don't know the answer. And
I don't know. Nobody knows, but
to a huge extent, the reason Web Summit is so successful is there are so many people there attending, speaking, that may have the answer. And I think everybody is searching. The world is, moving faster than ever before. Innovation is speeding up. And I think that creates a huge amount of uncertainty. And it's just very unclear. I think 100 years ago, there was a higher degree of certainty what the world would look like 5 years from now. Cars were just coming into fashion. It was clear that there would be more cars, less horses, and there were a few other changes. But now, what's the world going to look like in 5 years? You just don't know. 3 weeks ago, we thought OpenAI had the best model, AI kind of model in the world. It was setting all the kind of benchmarks. How could anybody compete? They had, literally tens of billions at their disposal, and Microsoft's kind of data centers to train all these models. So it was just an arms race where money mattered. And then the Chinese released DeepSeek, and it costs almost nothing. It's trained on a fraction of the data, and anybody can play with it. You basically don't need to pay for it. It's effectively free. And in a space of 3 weeks, it's just kind of crazy.
Do you think that maybe the answer is not how we actually reinvent technology, but how we reinvent our dealing with uncertainty?
Yeah, that's deep philosophical stuff. That could be, that's worthy of an hour kind of exploration. Yeah, I don't know, I'm bamboozled, and I organize Web Summit, but I'm as interested in just attending and going out for dinner with certain people and just listening to them, because, sometimes they're completely crazy, but oftentimes the craziest ones actually turn out to be they just disagree with, they don't see the present existing for very long, and they see some very different future, and sometimes that future that they see is correct. And that's what, for me, makes Web Summit so appealing,
You're always, connecting and coming in contact with so many innovators, so many
Sure.
companies, or startups, or ideas, let's say, solutions.
Yeah.
What would be your advice, let's say, to the young entrepreneurs living today, be it in Serbia or wherever? How and what is the most important thing?
Personally, I would say just go to China. They're pushing the frontiers of almost every technology. There's a very good report released by ASPI every year, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, and they track 50 or 60 of the verticals of technology. And 15 years ago, the US was leading in almost every single one, with Europe maybe in a couple of categories, but the US was totally dominant. China was almost nowhere to be seen. And fast forward to today, and China's leading in every single field except like 3 or 4, and they will probably lead in those in the next kind of year or two. So if you're interested in the future, whether it's AI or robotics or EVs or cars, battery technology, you really should either spend some time in China or spend some time learning about what's happening in China. I think for a long time it was, the only place you should go is maybe Silicon Valley or Boston, MIT. But I'm mesmerized watching videos and listening to experts on what's happening in China. It's just an undeniable force of the future.
Yeah, that is I think really, really true. And if you see the development of the, let's say, startup ecosystems,
yeah,
from 10 years ago being like catching investors worlds, to the catching customers world. So making the solution is one thing, making it from the solution the products on the market is something totally different. This is a sign of maturity, or it is a sign of not having the same ecosystems anymore?
Oh, yeah, it's a good question. I do think that one thing that has certainly changed over 30 years is the cost of building a software startup has kind of gone from here to here. One of the big trends at Web Summit, at least, is the ratio of bootstrap startups. So those are software startups, technology startups with no outside capital. So they have no investors, but they have customers. And over the last half a decade, that ratio has changed dramatically. They used to almost all be backed by investors. Oftentimes they're very early stage, so it's just friends and family, or maybe some angel investors or seed investors from the city or the country they're from. But now increasingly, there are more and more startups that are building software and getting customers without ever raising external capital. So why is that happening? It's happening because the costs of getting a prototype or getting a basic product market fit has fallen exponentially. It's never been cheaper to do that. And I just think that's a profound shift. I don't know what it means over the next kind of 5 years, but it sparks lots of, really interesting discussions. A trend that is apparent now to me is the participation, not just from Serbia, but if you draw a line all the way up through Eastern Europe, up to Ukraine, Belarus, in Web Summit has been going like this, because so many companies are getting started in parts of the world where there's huge amounts of engineering talent, and there's actually low costs of living relative to London or New York or San Francisco. And this is, I think this is a pretty much a kind of a mega trend. You can't go to Web Summit and you suddenly think, sorry, all innovation is coming from Silicon Valley and Berlin and Paris. But you're walking around Web Summit, you're like,
hey, no.
There's all these Lithuanians, and there's all these Estonians, and there's all these
Georgians, or
Georgians. It's just
Polish or
It's there is a huge shift, and I think, there's a big industrial legacy in Western Europe, but I increasingly think the future of software innovation is very much, to the east of Berlin, effectively, for all sorts of interesting reasons. Anyway, that's a totally separate discussion. You'll find people, who are scholars talking about it at Web Summit, and that should inform policy, not what. I'm just a ticket salesman. I should not be educating anybody on these things.
Where I think that your insight is leading, that how we talked about ecosystems before, like, having a government investing in some office spaces, giving some grants for some people on universities to build some spin-off companies, some startups or something. It's the world from yesterday, and how actually to reinvent also the governmental role and the role of the business community, because there is no traditional industry and innovative industry anymore separated.
Yeah.
This is the question.
No, I think it is very complicated. I was having a discussion on the phone today with someone who's advising, a government in the Middle East, and that government is looking to Vietnam and China for innovation policies that they should implement, and no longer thinking, because if they do a comparison over the last 20 years and they say, yep, absolutely, Silicon Valley's still creating lots of value, lots of interesting startups, but these other guys in Vietnam and China that we're supposed to ignore because they're following the wrong policies. But now it turns out those wrong policies, which weren't the policies of the West, seem to be working. So why should we not be, taking their formula and modifying it to apply to the Middle East and pursuing those? Or should we be taking the formula from Silicon Valley that doesn't seem to be working as well? It still works, but doesn't seem to be the sort of, the 5-star innovation policy. It's maybe 4-star. But the Chinese and Vietnamese and a couple of other, especially in Asia, came along and said, oh, like this, not this, let's modify this. And it's working better. So I don't know, for the rest of Europe, what do we adopt? Do we just copy what Silicon Valley's been doing for the last 20, 30, 40 years? Or do we now go and look at Vietnam and China and go, okay, this would work, we'll take a bit of this, a bit of that. And I really think we just have to educate ourselves a lot more about what they are doing, because it's working and you cannot deny it. And I'm sure you just take some of their policies, you mix it with some of the existing policies here, and you might have a winning formula.
This great insight. Thank you very much for we will have a lot of, and we can learn a lot from you and from your way of, let's say, approaching things in order to grow. Yeah, and this is something where I'm very, very happy that we have you here also in Serbia visiting us. And talking with us, and talking with startups, and talking with young people, and talking with companies, and talking with the government, of course. But at the end of our conversation, there is a huge passion for tennis that you have. And first, maybe your short, let's say, bringing the context together between startups and tennis.
Yeah, I mean, I play tennis now. I was very injured for a very long time, and a kind of back injury, spinal injury. Didn't play a match for maybe 14 years, and I was getting older and older and older. Did lots of rehabilitation, and then figured out I could play a little bit of tennis again. Then over the last 2 years, I've started to play a bit more tennis. But I actually do it because I don't have the minds. I can't run for an hour. I find it the most boring thing in the world. It's like I'm hyperactive. It's like I'm a TikToker or something. I can't, like, doing the same thing for an hour, like I'm riding a bicycle, swimming in a pool. Whereas I'm like a dog. Like, you put a ball in front of me, I'm like, oh, the ball's over there. And I just run and I chase down the ball, then the ball's over there. And no 2 shots, no shot on a tennis court is exactly the same. It's always just that little bit different. And I kind of think it just tricks my mind to spend an hour or 2 hours, doing something that hopefully will, stop me getting, sick or, dying young or something like that. So that's probably the primary kind of motivation. I also find it a form of meditation. I find if I do cycle, I can kind of think of other things. But when I'm playing tennis, I certainly don't have the ability to be processing anything more than like trying not to lose really badly.
Really being present.
Yeah. There's just, I can't process. I'm just like, I'm going to lose. I've got to really concentrate. And it just means after an hour or 2 hours, it's like a reset of the body. It's a form of it's yoga. It's a form of meditation, deep meditation.
That's true. Speaking about tennis, we will meet again very soon in Qatar.
Yeah.
Web Summit. There will be also some Serbian startups there, but at the same time there is the Qatar tennis tournament. And as we know, our tennis player Novak Djokovic will also play there. Can I count on you to wow with me and to support Novak?
Yeah, no, I'll be supporting Novak. Yeah, these are the most comfortable shoes. They are his shoes. I'd love to go and see. Go and watch the Qatar Open. It'd be fantastic. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you very, very much for this talk. Thank you very much, and see you in Qatar.
Great. Thanks a million. Thank you, Marco.
Živimo u vremenima eksponencijalnih promjena. Kada brzinu transformacije tehnologija i razvoja tehnologija ne mogu da prate ni politika, ni društvo, ni ekonomija. I upravo se ovime bavi knjiga Azima Azara, zaista fenomenalna knjiga o eksponencijalnom jazu, kako ga on naziva. Autor se fokusira na 4 ključna domena: računarstvo, energiju, biologiju i proizvodnju. Pokušava da odgovori na pitanje kako da prevaziđemo taj jaz ili bar kako da se sa njime ophodimo. Kako da negujemo kulturu učenja, kako da razvijemo fleksibilne strategije i ja mislim da je osnovna i ključna reč prilagođavanje. Kako da se prilagođavamo i kako da uvedemo kulturu prilagođavanja u naš svakodnevni život. Azem Azar upravo kroz duboko razumevanje ovog eksponencijalnog jaza govori kako da napravimo mogućnost da prevaziđemo problem koji nije mali problem, da smo mi jednostavno i psihološki i kao društva i kao politička uređenja nesposobni ili neadekvatni da pratimo tehnologiju i brzinu promjena koje se dešavaju u tehnološkom domenu. Ono što se posebno autor osvrće jeste kako da prilagođavamo politike i regulative, kako da razvijamo dugoročno razmišljanje. Ovo možda zvuči jednostavno, ali nije ni malo. Pogledajte i ne bi bilo loše, pročitajte ovu knjigu, ona se tiče zaista svih nas, bez obzira gde radili, šta radili, kako radili i gde živeli, da li u Srbiji, Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama, Kini ili na bilo kojem drugom delu naše planete. A do sledeće nedelje ostanite radoznali.